So
You made that up.
I will start by saying that supervising the removal of guano for 2 days was not an experience I ever thought I'd get. As an archaeologist, doing it in the middle of summer probably wasn't the best choice in terms of the smell. So yeah, I'm Rachel. I'm going to talk about the excavation of our probable enclosure ditch at Dalhousie. So this was our site here. We dug this last year in 2 phases, initially with an evaluation across the whole field. Down here, down here, and then came back for the targeted excavation in the area on the main part of the map. During this we uncovered the ditches that you can see running across, and also evidence of ironworking, and mainly in the form of slag. The whole field, as you can see from all the blue lines, was densely covered in field drains and furrows, which sadly cut through everything multiple times. But what can you do? So, evaluation was done in March last year, and the majority of the trenches across the field only recorded the field drains and some furrows. But on the last day of the site, because it's always on the last day of site, an unusual feature was spotted down the bottom here in trench 12. This turned out to be one end of ditch 2, as it became known. So we then expanded the trench and added in additional trenches in the area to try and uncover the full extent of the features, which turned into 6 potential ditch segments along with a pit. At the time, again, because last day, we only had time to dig 2 slots here and here into ditch 2, where we recovered 3 fills with slag and fired clay coming out of the upper fill. So these are 3 of the ditch segments there, Harry and I hard at work. And then this is a slot, you can see the darker upper fill that contained the slag. So we then went back in May for a targeted excavation of this corner of the site. Along with the ditches, which I'll discuss more in a second, we found limited other archaeological remains. So we had this stone surface to the northwest of the ditches. Unfortunately, we couldn't get its full extent. It extended beyond the limit of excavation, and we couldn't chase it because of service buffers. There's no obvious cut for this. It was just small rounded stones set into the natural. And we also uncovered 2 pits in addition to the one found during the evaluation. So pit 39, which is this one down here, was just to the northeast of the stone spread and had lots of stones in its fill, which could represent possible packing material. Pit 49, this one here, was cut into the terminus of ditch 1. The relationship wasn't exactly unclear at the time, but this one also has possible evidence of being a postal with this nice possible post pad set into the base of it. There's no other structures uncovered at the time, unfortunately, and there was no obvious date or definite function for either of these. Now, the main thing we found was the ditches. This turned out to be 2 suboval segments and a longer linear inside the excavation area, as opposed to the many segments that we thought we had during the evaluation. Ditch 1, which is in all 3 of these pictures, was just under 5 metres long. We dug 3 slots into it, and this was also the ditch where the vast majority of the slag recovered from site was found. You can see it here in the lower fill, and also all the large group images on the section drawing. Ditch 2 was primarily excavated during the evaluation. It was overall very similar to ditch 1, slightly longer, just under 6 metres. And the slag recovered from it came from its upper fills instead of lower fills. Lastly, ditch 3 was just over 26 metres long, much longer linear running across the site. Some slag was still recovered from this, again in the upper fill, the darker grey, in this lovely section photo. So, post-excavation was carried out after both phases of on-site work were completed. So, 12 fragments of fired clay were recovered from ditch 2 during the evaluation. These all had a very soft fabric and were overfired. None of them also seem to have come from any vessels, and they're more likely related to part of the industrial assemblage I'll talk about in a second. We then had this lovely quernstone, the upper stone of a rotary quern. This had 2 handle sockets, one in the side and base, as it turns out here, and then a second one just here in the top edge where it's broken. As you can see, the side handle socket has worn through to the grounding surface, suggesting it was in use for an extensive period of time. And also, the addition of the second socket suggests that people were continuing to use it and repairing it. It is unshaped in profile and has a diameter of 32 centimetres, both of which indicate that it's likely a Middle Iron Age date. Just nice actual dating evidence for a site, makes a change. We then had various environmental results from soil samples taken on the site. Wood charcoal was found in all of the flots, however the fragments were very small and poorly preserved, so unfortunately couldn't be identified. Slot 29 in ditch 3 had some more interesting results. Probable barley grains recovered from all of its fills, as well as pieces of hazelnut shell. These are trace signs of domestic debris, so even though we don't have any structures on the site, there may still be a suggestion of occupation. Only the hazelnut shells were large enough to be submitted for the radiocarbon dates that are in the table. So the middle fill of the slot returned the Middle Iron Age date, 99 to 51 BC, and the upper fill returned the Late Iron Age date, 41 to 204 AD. So we're getting nice consistent Iron Age. Then onto the main material recovered from the site, the industrial assemblage. Nearly 120 kilos of vitrified materials covered in total, indicating large-scale ironworking. As you can see from the numbers, most of this comes from ditch 1, with smaller amounts from ditch 2 and ditch 3. Most of the material has been identified as iron smelting slag. Many of the pieces have vitrified ceramic and heat-affected soil still adhering, so we're in contact with the furnace walls and on the ground while they were still hot. Speaking of furnaces, the other main material that was recovered is vitrified ceramic. Some pieces of this still had slag adhered to them, other way around, and it's likely that this comes from smelting furnace walls. So even though we don't have the furnaces, we do have suggestions of their structures in the material recovered. Both of these show that smelting activity has to have been nearby, even though we have probably lost the structures to ploughing and the insertion of all the field drains. There's little other evidence for Iron Age ironworking in the Lothians at the moment, so this is a significant find for the region to show that there was large-scale iron production going on in the area. It's been estimated that the total assemblage could be comparable to sites like Kilduffel up in Murray, which is seen as a large centre for industrial activities. But the field drains do have one use. They can be used to suggest that the site was quite boggy in the past, meaning that this could have been a good source of bog iron ore that was the main type used in Iron Age ironworking in Scotland, which would help explain the location of the site. Finally, we're not the only site in the area. As you can see, just across the road is the Brixwold enclosure, which was excavated by AOC back in the 90s. This was a large sub-rectangular enclosure, again had no remaining features inside it due to plough damage. Their radiocarbon dates sort of broadly line up with ours. The upper ditch fills produce late Iron Age dates of 54 to 215 AD, and the lower ditch fills produced earlier Iron Age dates 375 to 176 BC, which predate our Middle Iron Age evidence, but if taken as a sort of combined set of sites, suggests continuous occupation in the area throughout the Iron Age. And one possible interpretation of the two is as a combined domestic and industrial centre, with the ironworking taking place at Dalhousie South and the occupation on the potentially drier land across the road at the Brixwold enclosure. And that's all for now. Thank you.